Forgotten concepts, Pontiac Banshee. It could have been Judge Dredd's car, nearly sentenced the Corvette to death, and was banished from the New York Auto Show. The name Banshee makes superstitious Irish folks shiver and glance nervously around. It belongs to a terrifying woman from Irish folklore whose wails and cries foretell death. Not the most positive image, and one that doesn't really go well with a car, a means of high-speed transportation. Naming a car Banshee feels like tempting fate, and yet history knows Hellcat, Demon, Diablo, Phantom, Gremlin, and other Halloween-style names. So Banshee was fair game. Defunct American brand Pontiac gave that name to a series of concept cars that promised a rough ride for the Corvette and Mustang. Unfortunately, they never went into production and remained just awesome ideas. The reasons for that were far from mystical. Although, Pontiac was remembered as General Motors' most youthful and rebellious division. Its showy models sometimes looked comical and naive in their flashy pseudo-sportiness. But others, like the ultra-aggressive Batmobile Firebird Trans Am from 1998-2002 with its wicked 5.7-liter LS1 aluminum V8, still inspire awe and respect today. Of course, it wasn't always like that. After World War II, Pontiacs couldn't boast of either style or spirit. Buyers were clearly unimpressed. Practicality is great, but not enough on its own. Where was the style and personality? Patrick Wright, author of On a Clear Day You Can See General Motors, didn't mince words. He said Pontiac had problems and its cars were suitable only for the elderly. The winds of change began to blow through Pontiac in 1956 when Seaman Bunky Knudsen became general manager, the very same man responsible for the oversized and clumsy 1971 Mustang, later fired from Ford as company president. But at Pontiac and GM, he was headed for a very different kind of career. The new boss appointed Pete Estes from Oldsmobile as chief engineer and made his assistant a young and talented John DeLorean, whose name would soon be known around the world. This trio started reshaping Pontiac's image, even getting the brand into NASCAR. In 1961, Knudsen was promoted to head Chevrolet, leaving behind a solid foundation for growth. Estes filled the vacant seat. DeLorean, who became a close friend of Knudsen, rose to chief engineer and started shaking things up. Among other things, we have him to thank for the classic mid-size muscle car, the Pontiac GTO. Even before launching the GTO, DeLorean and Estes considered the idea of a lightweight, affordable sports car influenced by British roadsters of the time. That vision took shape in the 1964 XP883 concept. Doesn't its fiberglass body remind you of the third-generation Corvette or the earlier Mako Shark II show car? But there's no plagiarism here. Chevy wouldn't debut until 3 years later. In fact, the project was influenced by the Chevrolet Corvair Monza GT concept. The XP883 existed in various forms: a silver hardtop prototype with a 157 HP inline-six, and a white convertible with a 5.3-liter, 326 CI V8, making 253, 284 GP. Sources vary. Of course, Pontiac dreamed of something grander, a true high-flying bird. According to Hot Rod magazine, former engineer Bill Collins once admitted that he and DeLorean even considered fitting a monstrous 421 CI, 6.9-liter V8, provided the car reached production. That wouldn't be difficult since the XP883 borrowed 80% of its internals from the production Tempest. So why don't we call this Pontiac concept Banshee? Because that name wasn't coined until much later, in 1971. Strange, right? Be patient. We'll explain why. The lead designer dubbed the car a Mustang fighter, but GM's top brass saw it as a threat to the Chevrolet Corvette. Such a thing was unthinkable. How dare a lowly Pontiac challenge GM's flagship sports car? Meanwhile, the rebellious DeLorean believed deeply in the project. First, he showed it to GM President Ed Cole, then to the board of directors. The outcome was predictable. The car was killed instantly. Still, its brilliant ideas left an impression, and were later clearly visible in the Corvette C3, Opel GT, and first-generation Pontiac Firebird. The next attempt came in 1966. Pontiac built the Banshee concept, XP798, originally called Scorpion, with a powerful 421 CI V8 and stunning design. Unfortunately, a major scandal followed. The car was set to debut at the New York Auto Show. Presentations were prepped, press releases printed, but at the last moment, GM President James Roach personally canceled the whole thing. It's painful to imagine what DeLorean felt. The coupe was never shown publicly and was later destroyed. Only the badges survived. Collins glued them onto the XP 883, retroactively making it a Banshee. Banshee 2, 1968, was an attempt to make the first-generation Firebird pony car more aerodynamic and memorable. It had a fiberglass body and a 400 CI, 6.6-liter, V8 under the hood. The origins of Banshee 3, 1974, are obvious at a glance. It was a styling exercise on the second-generation Firebird. Note the panoramic rear glass, which later appeared on production F-bodies, Chevy Camaro, Pontiac Firebird. The front-end design echoed the iconic 1977-1978 Firebird. The engine, a monstrous 455 CI, 7.5-liter, V8 Super Duty making 314 GP. By the time Banshee 3 was unveiled, John DeLorean had long since left Pontiac. On February 15, 1969, he became head of Chevrolet, GM's best-selling brand. The Banshee name faded into obscurity for almost 15 years. The Ghost came back to life at the end of the 1980s, an era remembered for its boldness, daring, and excess, especially in cars, fashion, and music. If earlier Banshees were attempts to improve the Firebird, the final version was an exotic supercar, a triumph of independent, risky, and uninhibited design signed by designer Tom Peters. He joined GM in 1982 and stayed for 37 years. His first work was the sleek Corvette Indy concept. Compared to that, the Banshee looked like a spaceship. It was stunning from every angle, but especially impressive from the front, where it featured an extreme reimagining of Pontiac's signature split grille. The interior transported you into the distant future. The driver sat in a separate pod, the center console angled toward them and fused with the tunnel. The steering wheel likely broke the world record for buttons. There were nearly 20. It also featured a head-up display showing speed, RPM, and fuel level, a rear-view camera, an onboard computer, and even a display showing lateral G-forces. Since the Banshee was a top-tier project, GM ditched its classic pushrod V8S. The concept used a then-advanced 4.0-liter overhead cam V8 by GM standards. It wasn't built for top speed or crazy power, though 233 GP was far from weak for the time, and the 55 miles per hour, 89 kilometers per h, electronic limit definitely didn't reflect its real potential. Anyone could imagine what this aerodynamic starship, without rear-view mirrors or door handles, was really capable of.